In the heart of Central America, against the Pacific Ocean and between Guatemala and Honduras, lies El Salvador. It's a poor nation whose recent history revolves almost exclusively around poverty and war. With a population of just over, debatably, 6 million people, it's a small but dense country. After decades of unstable and oligarchic control over the coffee-based economy following the 1930s, the country was eventually plunged into a civil war from 1980 to 1992, which caused more than 75,000 deaths and 8,000 disappearances. But upon the signing of the Chapultepec Peace Accords, some semblance of order was finally established, and the two most prominent warring factions then morphed into the country's primary yet oppositional political parties. The left-wing coalition, which operated under the banner of the FMLN, and the right-wing Arena Party would go on to alternate power in the years following the war. Many Salvadorans had initially fled to the United States to escape the conflict, but it was actually in the US and Los Angeles specifically where these Salvadoran migrants would form some of the world's most terrifying gangs, most notably MS-13. And once the war concluded, many of these gangsters in America either returned or were simply deported back to El Salvador by the Clinton administration, and they brought their criminal organization with them. The gang activity swept the nation and kept a stranglehold on Salvadoran society. It went on to infect the political structure just as drastically. Almost certainly due to the influence of the West, most of the Salvadoran presidents after the war attempted to democratize the country and impose neoliberal policies. The most relevant of these actions was the adoption of the US dollar as its official currency in 2001. But the country would not, in actuality, trend toward becoming a Western liberal democracy. Funny how that works. 5 of the 6 presidents who served between 1989 and 2019 eventually had criminal charges brought against them. And in 2015, the country earned the reputation as one of the most dangerous places in the world, with a murder rate of 103 per 100,000. The country was an objective third world mess, and it would take a Herculean effort led by one man to change it. Nayib Bukele was born in the capital city of San Salvador on July 24, 1981. He's ethnically actually only half Salvadoran. His maternal lineage comes from El Salvador, but his father's parents had fled the British occupation of Palestine and arrived in the country back in 1929. The family was middle class, and Bukele grew up going to a private school in the city. At only 18, he started his first business, which was an advertising agency called Obermet, and he led this until permanently stepping down in 2012. Bukele also studied law at the Universidad Centroamericana, but would drop out to focus on his business projects, and he had immense success as an entrepreneur. From 2009 to 2012, while still continuing to head his marketing company, he was made the president of Yamaha Motors El Salvador. But as he eyed politics, his attention shifted. He resigned from his senior corporate positions in 2012 and led a successful bid for mayor of Nuevo Cuscatlán, a town just outside of San Salvador. He ran under the FMLN banner, and at 31, he became the youngest mayor in the country's history. He then went on to win the mayoral election for the city of San Salvador in 2015, receiving 89% of the votes. He had overwhelming success as mayor of both cities. He implemented numerous urban renewal plans and social programs within both towns, and the public maintained a remarkably favorable opinion of him through it all. But Bukele's relationship with the FMLN party eventually weakened, as he was criticized by its leaders for a confrontational and media-centered approach to politics. He was eventually expelled from the party in 2017, primarily for his continual attacks on the other party leaders. But Nayib levied accusations that FMLN had ultimately become corrupt. After the expulsion, he founded his own political party and looked to the presidential election in 2019. But the Supreme Electoral Tribunal rejected his bid to register with the new party because they claimed he failed to meet certain legal requirements. So Bukele joined the small, center-right Grand Alliance for National Unity Party, which had offered him their candidacy position. Bukele focused his campaign on criticizing both the FMLN and Arena parties as the reasons for the country's long list of problems. He would win the 2019 election with 53% of the votes, while running as essentially a third-party candidate. After the successful election effort, Bukele singularly committed his administration to overcoming the gang violence in the country. His first move was to attack the gang's finances and reduce their operational ability. $500 million in assets would end up being seized in a single year by his government. He followed this up by implementing legal reforms to allow for easier prosecution of gang members. As the gangs began to fight back, 2021 saw an uptick in murders, which allowed Bukele to declare a state of emergency and suspend the constitutional rights of the gang members. Lethal force against suspects was authorized without requiring a judicial order, and this allowed the military to execute their will and actually succeed in the war. Bukele expanded the prison sentence of gang members substantially in 2022, and that same year the administration arrested over 56,000 gang members. To deal with all these captive criminals, Bukele then ordered the construction of major prisons across the country. The eradication of the gangs in El Salvador was a prerequisite to any actual honest financial prosperity. But once the violence problem was finally solved, Bukele could then turn his focus to improving the economy. His administration has invested $1.52 billion into social welfare programs, infrastructure, tourism attraction, and security, and he's made additional investments since. Some of the notable projects funded by the Bukele government are the Rosales Hospital in San Salvador, the Pacific Train Railway, the San Salvador Monorail, the Eastern Airport, Surf City and Surf City 2, and the National Library of San Salvador. He's also greenlit over $14.2 billion in construction permits since taking power in 2019, and this alone was estimated to have created over 167,000 jobs. After negotiating with the International Monetary Fund, Bukele was granted access to a $1.3 billion loan that allowed the country to improve its debt conditions, strengthen the international reserves, and support the nation's macroeconomic stability. Bukele also helped clear the path for the country to fully tap into its mining potential. He worked to unlock over $131 billion worth of natural resources that should eventually become a staple of the Salvadoran economy. Even though the coronavirus, of course, had a substantially negative impact on El Salvador's economy in 2020, it rebounded hard in 2021 and the GDP grew more than 10%. And it's continued to grow ever since, as Bukele slashed taxes for micro, small, and medium-sized businesses throughout the nation. And the president took another major step into the future on September 7, 2021, by making El Salvador the first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. He also facilitated the creation of a national electronic wallet called Chivo, which allows Salvadorans to send, receive, store, and spend Bitcoin without fees. A Bitcoin city is in the works too. The vision is for a Bitcoin-only metropolis powered entirely by geothermal energy, and it's intended to be a tax haven with all duties except for VAT to be dismissed. The hope is to attract foreign investors while springboarding Bitcoin's use as a legitimate currency. Bukele's government has purchased an enormous amount of Bitcoin as a strategic reserve and implemented a 1 Bitcoin per day policy, with occasional purchases of larger quantities made as well. And none of the Bitcoin purchased has been sold, despite unrealized gains of over $400 million. El Salvador hopes to become the Singapore of the Americas, and the Altius Tech Park was one of the first actionable steps toward this goal. The $72 million investment brought 44,000 square meters of leasable office space to the country. With 7 office buildings and 1 data center, the completion of this development created over 5,000 direct jobs for the Salvadoran economy. And in 2024, Google opened an office right in downtown San Salvador. Bukele's administration has put immense focus on improving the educational opportunities of the country's children. The efforts centered on increasing school safety, improving the training, performance, and working conditions of teachers, providing children with preschool education, creating universal schooling with adequate standards to measure against, allowing for higher educational opportunities, as well as providing tertiary education programs, and improving the infrastructure for the country's existing schools and upgrading their equipment. As of late 2023, the Bukele administration had provided over 1.5 million uniforms, shoes, supplies, and computers to students, increased teachers' base salaries by over 20%, and refurbished over 1,000 schools. They also expanded the educational course offerings with the addition of new high school programs and vocational training to also facilitate careers in the trades. Scholarships were started which fund programs in English and technology to help strengthen Salvadoran students' capacities to compete in the Western economy. Bukele insisted from the start of his administration that he would remain transparent in all elements of his governance. He's digitized public procedures and services, published state contracts and purchases for public review, and created an international commission against impunity. And his actions on opposing corruption have recovered over $400 million previously stolen by former governments. The implementation of these anti-corruption measures have even led to the arrest of many compromised high-level officials and judges.
Estamos aquí reunidos, son parte del Ejecutivo, del órgano ejecutivo, que es el del cual yo estoy encargado, a excepción de una persona. Es el fiscal general que está aquí, él no es del Ejecutivo. Y está acá por una razón bien sencilla. Y es porque le quiero pedir en público de que investiguemos a todos los que están acá. Para atrás y para adelante. Yo me imagino que pues no hay ningún problema, ¿no? Hay una persona que me dijo una vez, mire, ¿y tú no le temes a la muerte? Yo le dije, no, pues claro, nadie se quiere morir. Yo no me quiero morir, pero yo sé que me voy a morir algún día, como todos. Si hay algo que no se puede escapar es de la muerte. Todos los que estamos aquí pues, en 100 años pues, no va a haber nadie vivo. Nadie. Ninguno de los que estamos aquí, lo más probable es que nadie sabe cómo se llama el papá del abuelo de uno. Pero hay algo que yo sí le tengo miedo, y es a dejar un mal legado. Y hay presidentes, unos presos, otros fugitivos, pero la mayoría son recordados como ladrones. Yo no quiero ser recordado como el ladrón. Entonces yo no robo, porque no quiero ser recordado como el ladrón o el corrupto. Pero hubo un presidente, el presidente Duarte, que la gente decía en ese entonces, el presidente no es ladrón, pero se rodeó de ladrones. Y en algún momento representó una esperanza para el pueblo salvadoreño. Pero si acaso es verdad que él no robó, qué tonto fue. Porque él era la esperanza del pueblo, no tocó un centavo y manchó su legado por rodearse de ladrones. Entonces a mí no me va a pasar eso. Yo no voy a ser el presidente que no robó, pero se rodeó de ladrones. Pero que me recuerden como el presidente que no robó y que no dejó que nadie robara. Y al que robó lo metió a la cárcel. Ya hay un par que ya están en la cárcel.
And due to all this progress, Bukele has retained an astoundingly high approval rating from his citizens. And with the reinterpretation of the Constitution to no longer restrict term limits, I'm sure his reign will continue, as it should. His people love him, and he's clearly having miraculous and objective success. A government and its people can be equated to a coach's relationship to its team of players. A team with wildly talented players doesn't really need much of a coach to win, but a team without any significant talent needs a really great coach just to win it all. And America had so much success in its earlier years because of the rare combination of the greatest talent in the world coupled with some of the best leaders in all of history. El Salvador may not have a team as talented as the Western world, but its coach is clearly world class. And even though the US has had such impressive players and coaches during its golden age, it's obvious that not only has our talent pool dwindled, but the political offices are so hollowed out that they exclusively attract and get filled by those who are merely seeking the status. And they want these positions purely for their own self-enrichment rather than from a desire to govern effectively. It's taken however many years of incompetency for us to finally come to terms with the fact our system is no longer working like it used to. We don't have the talent or the coaches to remain the greatest country in the world. But what Bukele's rise and success explains to the entirety of the West is that even with the decline we have seen within our own society, we still can't accept any excuse given by our rulers. Because one of the most dangerous places in the world only needed a singular capable man to turn it into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere in just a few years. So why can't we and every other country follow suit? When Elon Musk bought Twitter, he cut 75% of its staff, and yet the site is running better than it used to, and it's on its way to profitability. So why isn't every company in tech mimicking this? The fact that after seeing the success of Elon, these companies still insist on paying $150,000 a year to 24-year-old women with communications degrees so that they can come in at 11 a.m., eat a catered lunch, then leave at 1:30 after getting a free matcha latte, tells us with certainty that the world we live in is not as it seems. The inefficiency must be intentional. Similar to this, El Salvador's immediate success shows us that the solutions to our societal problems have not just always existed, but they're directly attainable. To let our society rot is a choice, and Bukele proves this. It is not simply the cost of freedom to let a random black man stab an innocent woman in the neck. We don't have to live this way. And liberals, instead of looking for ways to strengthen our society, insist on defending the human rights of criminals and savages. They'll claim El Salvador's prison conditions are a violation of human rights, and speak nothing of the entirely new lives that this safety has afforded its productive citizens. A U.S. senator even flew to El Salvador to fight for the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, otherwise known as the Maryland Man, a native Salvadoran human trafficker who was sent back to serve his time in El Salvador's prison system. Emphasizing the rights of these animals elucidates the left's absurd policies as well as their deep disdain for good and honest people. But here is Bukele's perfect response to the accusation of infringement upon human rights by his government.
Was literally the most dangerous country in the world. We have triple the amount of the murder rate that Haiti has right now. With all the mayhem that they have, we have triple that here. So what do you have to do? You have to stop that, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you don't even need to have a big thought process. You have to stop that. That's the first thing you have to do. When we did that, we got huge condemnations. You name it. Say an organization, we got a condemnation from them. So, and a lot of them were human rights organizations. And you would ask, what about the human right of a woman not to be raped? I mean, what about the human right of kids to play or to be free or to go to the park? And what about the human right to live, or the human right to walk in the street, right? But no, they were worried about the human rights of the killers, which they have human rights. I don't say they don't. They're humans. But if you have to prioritize, what will you prioritize?
Yes.
Right? The human rights of the honest, hardworking, decent people, not the human rights that they do have, but you won't prioritize the human rights of the killers and rapists and murderers.
Because Bukele understands that mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent, and like all competent men, Bukele deals in outcomes instead of mythological platitudes that have no basis in true political science. Liberals will tell you it's self-evident that all men desire knowledge, yet ignore everything in their daily life which so clearly refutes this. Because anyone that investigates outcomes in the world understands that these monikers are pure nonsense. But the left will excuse the clear rot of our society by claiming the defense of an abstract metaphysical principle. They'll tell you all men want freedom, and that the rot we see is just the cost to uphold it. But this must be rejected outright as fantastical thinking with absolutely no basis in reality. We must rely on definable criteria for a society's success, and an objective review of Bukele's outcomes proves his success. So it's now on us to demand this for ourselves. And as is often misunderstood about the red-pilled right, we are absolutely cheering on El Salvador and its people, and we only wish to see their success continue. We want every country to prosper like this because it's possible and what the people deserve. I visited the country last year and I felt safer in San Salvador than any U.S. city I've ever been to in the last 10 years. If El Salvador can do it, absolutely everyone can too. But the sweetest irony is that the country literally named the Savior is the first one taking a true stand in opposition to these demons dragging our civilization down.